You found The Secret Life of Contracts, where Olga Mack and John Lindsey reveal the good, bad, and ugly of agreements across all industries.
Welcome, everybody, to The Secret Life of Contracts with myself and my esteemed colleague, Olga Mack, where she's going to tell you all about why words really, really matter. And today's episode in particular, close to my heart because I absolutely love music. If anybody follows along, you know that. This is about the Beatles, and it's about how the contract that they almost signed or didn't sign almost made the Beatles not happen. Hard to believe. And it wasn't because of their talent level. It wasn't because they didn't have fans. Because look, I watched the videos. The girls were passing out in public watching them. They had fans, all right. And it wasn't because they didn't want to give up the control over their music. It was all about the power over their wardrobe, of all things. It's absolutely insane. Olga, talk to me about what's going on here. Is that true?
I mean, would you sign a contract that tells you what to wear, where to go, and where to smile? I mean, fun fact, I would not show up here if I didn't put on what makes my day.
Well, I think maybe I actually kind of did sign that contract because my wife dresses me and kind of has to tell me where to go. The only thing she doesn't have to do is tell me when to smile. So you're right. So yes, I might have already signed that contract, but that's another story. The Beatles absolutely hesitated for months, and they almost missed their shot, Olga. Could you believe that we almost missed out on one of the greatest rock bands that have ever taken over America because of a contract?
Yeah, I mean that story of Beatles is near and dear to my heart, not because they were my contemporaries, but because I would not happen if it weren't for them, because my dad seduced my mother using Beatles. So I think the marriage and Olga would not happen. But that aside, when you simplify contracts, everything changes. And that's why we're here. So yes, the Beatles story is near and dear to my heart because but for Beatles, Olga would not be here.
And we got Olga and we got me, and here we are together because what, Olga? This is the Secret Lives of Contracts. Let's do it. It's all you. Set us up. Set the scene for us.
Yes. So let's rewind to 1961.
When I wasn't born.
I was definitely not born. In fact, I believe my mother wasn't born. So yeah, that was a little while ago. It's not quite ancient history. It's definitely not dark ages, but it is the history that I cannot remember. But the Beatles were, four scrappy kids playing in Liverpool clubs, and crowds loved them. Let's be very clear. Girls loved them. Local fame was rising. My mother was telling me how she was passing out every time she was seeing them. My dad was passing out and wearing bell buttons and channeling Paul McCartney and all of that. But here's the deal. They were successful, all right, and had no manager. They had no adult supervision. And they didn't have a record deal. And so that's a problem, especially at the time, but even today, because you don't have a record deal, you don't scale. It's a good start to be cute, but if you don't know how to scale, cute is where you end.
Good point. And so here's a familiar name. Enters Brian Epstein. Everybody that's in the music space knows it, right? He owned the record store. He dressed fancy, wore the suits, knew the business, and he absolutely saw something in them. So what did he do? He offered to manage them.
Yes. And I lost the script. Hold on a second.
You see that? Contracts matter, man. So words matter. You see that?
So what was the brand's reaction? I mean, I guess it's a normal reaction, suspicion. Why? Because the contract he proposed was a boilerplate manager speak. Here you're talking to two kids who were not into contracts. They were into music. And they looked at the contract and they thought exactly what a normal human being would think about. There has to be a gotcha moment. And it turned out that Mr. Epstein was a little bit of a control enthusiast. He wanted full authority, booking, image, touring, money. Practically speaking, he wanted to tell them when to smile.
Wow, brutal. But I love the way you put this. You told me that he wanted to take them from band to brand, right? It's amazing. But the contract said control, not co create. And that was really the problem, right? They felt they had talent, they wanted to be part of that process.
Yeah. And it turns out when you're talent, you don't feel like an employee. You don't want to be managed. At best, you will co create. That is the most sincere compliment a talented person will tell you. They're never looking for somebody who's parental control. They're not looking for a boss. They're not looking for a manager. The most sincere compliment a creative person will give you is that let's collaborate. I see you. You're an equal. The two of us together can 1 + 1 make greater than 2.
Wow. And so what happens? So we've got some hidden conflict here. And what did it do? Well, it stalled the deal, right? For almost 3 months, they didn't sign it. Epstein's contract gave him way, way, way too much control with too little clarity for ultimately what they were going to be trusted with. So let's talk about it. What were his obligations and what were theirs, Olga?
Yeah, the early contract was 100% about being protective for the manager, and it was 0% empowering for the talent. And as I said, when you're a creative person, that's not what you want. You want a collaboration. The most sincere compliment you can give is I see you as equal. Let's show up as ourselves and make something bigger and better together. So when you put a protective contract, the one that, has all the bells and whistles and controls outcomes and over engineers, that is not a contract, my friends. That is a cage masqueraded in legalese. And that cage, to someone who is not a lawyer, who is in fact a creative person, that doesn't just look like a cage. That looks like a POW camp. And that is the most unattractive thing that you can ever put in front of really anyone, but especially somebody who is not fluent in legal, and especially somebody who is, let's just say on the creative free spirit side.
Well, the crazy part is here's the kicker. Epstein also couldn't pitch them to record labels until he had signed that agreement. So not only were they stuck, but he was stuck also, and they're losing momentum fast. So what happens, Olga?
Yeah, so the Beatles were worried about a lot of things. Yes, creative control, and we talked a lot about it. But it also gave Mr. Epstein the right to approve everything. And I mean everything from their tour dates to closing. Yeah, the smile clause was not there, but it was read into that they're gonna be basically Mr. Epstein puppets. And that's not attractive. That is again not what anyone wants, definitely not what a creative person wants. And so yes, he could tell them stop wearing leather jackets or comb their hair. And remember, they all had a personality of their own and they had a brand collectively. And so it was an interesting discussion, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they had good hair. So, they they obviously looked at that and thought there's no way in the world. So what did it do? It made them hesitate in their minds. The deal, and you've said this before, was not at all about growth, right? It was about taking things away from them. So some of the key takeaways here, right? Every contract is a signal, right? It either says I trust you or I don't trust you. And when I don't trust you, what happens? You can lose the deal. So when legal terms are vague or lopsided, they slow things down. Over lawyering just kills deals. You know this. It kills timing, and timing in deals, Olga, it's everything.
Yeah, generally speaking, over lawyering and over engineering kills deals. And I want to drill down a little bit. It's not the reason for that is because for a partnership to grow, for people to show up as they are, and to create a third thing, you need to give room. And when you over engineer or over lawyer, which is really exactly the same thing as over engineering, just with words, you suck the oxygen out of the relationship. You do not allow a possibility of finding a third to grow creatively, to really show up as themselves, to give people safety, to do the right thing for the partnership. And that illusion of control, while may give you a psychological safety, will most certainly suffocate a relationship, whether it's a creative relationship, a romantic relationship, or a business relationship, and will most certainly not lead to the outcome of a partnership where you really are trying to co-create a third thing that doesn't exist together, that the two of you are not capable of creating on your own. And so what do you do when that happens? Well, what you need to do is to talk. You need to build that relationship to allow the control enthusiast on the team to feel comfortable that they know you, and to feel folks who need to give up some control to trust you. That this opportunity to get to know each other, talk things through, to really figure out what you're made of, and really build that relationship and trust. That's what needs to be happening. And that's why a lot of contracts end up in negotiation. And I often say red lines are not negotiations, because red lines is not where you build relationship and trust. Conversations are. And so they have to talk.
Yeah, and once they did that, Olga, and to your point, right? What did they do? They were able to rework the contract to give Mr. Epstein control on the business side. But what's the kicker? The kicker was they carved out enough space for them to be themselves, right? So they got to influence and control how they appeared and gave them independence in areas that really mattered to them. And to your point, how'd they do that? They talked about what was important to each other, right?
Yeah, again, they didn't add 40 pages of legalese. There was no red line war. It took listening, clarifying, simplifying. It was an act of human and connection and building trust and getting to know each other that helped them to get to a better outcome.
And boom, what happens after that happened, Olga? They signed. And next week, Epstein started doing what he's born to do: pitch, sell, and scale.
Yeah. And what happened 3 months later? Beatles had a record deal with EMI. Not bad for simplified contract. 3 months later, after you build a relationship, after you trust, after you figure out what you're made of, boom, it becomes big. It goes worldwide. I will even say it goes viral before viral was a thing. So good contracts don't control, just like good relationships don't control. They unlock a potential of everyone involved that they were not able to unlock on their own.
No, it's amazing. And the impact, I mean, we all saw it, even if we weren't alive back then, like me, I wasn't alive, you weren't alive, mom was obviously alive. But what happened? I mean, it was unbelievable, right? That phenomenon, just like some of the other things that we're going to be discussing in these sessions, the Beatles went from a bunch of kids playing clubs to the global sensations like we had never seen after they showed up on the Ed Sullivan Show, and everybody in the world went crazy.
Yeah, that's the difference between talent and a brand. Something that can be scaled, something that can be taken globally, something that, took them to a completely next level. And a contract is important here. It gave them structure, not a cage. It didn't suffocate them. It gave them room. It gave them an authority and shared incentives and a trust in each other that collectively they are much bigger than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, true. And for Epstein's role, right? What did it do? He had skill sets too, and he brought them to the table because the contract allowed him to do that, right? So it gave him the clarity to lead, and they put their trust in him to do that and handle the business. And lo and behold, boom, we saw it fly, right? That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, behind every artist, there's almost always a talented business manager. And this tug of war of control and co-creation is absolutely there. There's no right way to do it. It depends on personalities and needs of everyone involved. But, the power of a good contract is definitely something that is important in that relationship. It is not just a piece of paper. It is a permission. It's a permission and a structure to build. It's a permission to scale. It's a permission to win and to win together.
Yeah, and when they did, and I love how you put this when you say it doesn't, the deal didn't just protect the downside, right? It fueled the upside. And I'd say it more than fueled it, it poured gasoline on it. So, what are we taking away from this? The right contract doesn't just close the deal, it clears the runway for takeoff, right? That's amazing. And secondly, what do we take away? You don't build a rocket ship by arguing about the seat cushions. I love that quote, right? You got to let it blast off and do its thing. Did it? Yeah, absolutely. It was unbelievable.
And sometimes you just have to get on the rocket ship and negotiate a seat later, because the reality of not being on the rocket ship means you are left behind or the thing never took off. And the contract is definitely that rocket ship that can propel you forward. And you just have to get on the ship, make sure that the basics are there, and then you co-create together as you fly. So let's break down what originally was wrong with the contract and what happened and how they work together to get it better.
Well, let's take the first clause then. I mean, we know what the problem with that was, right? Too much authority on Epstein's side, right? Originally, he had absolute say. He was God over everything. They revised it. His control was specific in terms of areas where he could make business decisions, but he wasn't going to affect their creative nature.
Yeah, a big thing was about money. And you'll find that, money is very important, and to make it clear to folks what's in it for them. In fact, in every conversation you have, and if you build relationship, answering the fundamental question of what's in it for you is probably the most important. And so the revenue split was a big thing. The deal really started as a standard percentage with very little transparency. And the final contract had spelled out expenses, recoupables, escalators, all the ways folks can win and all the exciting things that will happen when that happens. And so everyone knew, everybody believed, everybody had a conviction to get paid, that they will get paid. And that conviction that, yeah, sure, we'll go through some turbulence, but in the end, plus minus, I will come out ahead. If someone doesn't have that conviction, they will not sign a contract.
No, great point. And the other piece was the restriction, right? They felt like it was too locked, right? They couldn't get out. And so the next piece of focus was really about edits that included the performance thresholds. If Epstein didn't deliver on the business side, the Beatles could walk. Again, they needed an out. So another key part to a contract is making sure people don't feel like they're locked in, right?
Yeah. From legal point of view, it was really a shift from power and control to partnership. From what could go wrong and how can I mitigate a damage to how can we win together and how do we play to win. And that is a mind shift. And if you change your mind, the way you contract will change and your outcomes will be affected.
Yeah, as they were here. And so, and really taking a different perspective from the sales view, that contract flipped from a blocker to an enabler. So Epstein could pitch with confidence. He could do his thing, right? But the band could focus on the music. And then what happened? Hey, momentum, boom, right back to where they started, right? So what practical lessons are we taking away from this? We're taking away lessons like contracts should protect, but not paralyze, right? Negotiation is not about control. You say this all the time, Olga, it's about clarity. And if your contract slows the deal, it's not done yet, right? So you got to get things done. They have to be clear. That's the secret to be able to get those things signed off on and close a good deal.
Yeah.
So the closing takeaways for us, Olga, the Beatles weren't signed because they were talented. They were signed because they had the right person with the right authority backed by the right agreement, right?
Yeah, being talented is table stakes. Without that, you're not in conversation. I mean, you wouldn't be in that conversation, but there's so much more to that than just being talented. And that's just true with whether we're talking about music, startups, anything really of value that gives joy to others. And I find it really interesting that they didn't need 60-page contract. What you really need is alignment. And that's a very human thing to do. It's about conversations. It's about shared expectations. It's about trust. That is not achieved by an instrument. That is achieved with a conversation and lived experiences together. And sure, then you can use contract to put some sort of structure in it so it could be scaled.
Well, and to your point, the return on investment of a great contract becomes speed, confidence, and commitment. You get those things when you do it right. And fundamentally, trust is what fueled all those things. They got it.
Yeah, yeah. Not every deal needs to be a symphony, but sometimes, it just needs to be a well-tuned chord.
Just like us, Olga, right? Together, right? We know this is the secret life of contracts. What do? We draft for clarity, we sign for trust, we scale for confidence, right? That's what we do.
And I never tell you where to smile or what to wear or how high to jump, John. I think that's the secret to our relationship.
And you don't arrange my bookshelves either. So listen, next time. So we're going to keep doing this because these are fantastic. I mean, they got pop culture, they've got contract and legal, they got sales, they got everything that people want to talk about these days. We're going to do it again. So let me tell you a little bit about what's next. Next time, the clause that nearly killed the Pixar Disney partnership, and more importantly, what saved it, Olga. So good stuff. You going to join me again?
Will you tell me when to smile?
Negative. You can smile all the time. It's your square. You own that square right now. It's yours. I see you.
All right. I'll see you then.
We are over and out. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next time.